So to our discovery is that this aspect has been there for some time, and I do highlight that even in the parliamentary sitting, last time this was raised, but it has not been done. So we hope going forward we'll see that policy for state-owned enterprises is going to be in place. Chairperson, let me take you to 2.2, where we consider the benefits of a national airline in Zambia. So for a national airline, in general, you will note that any airline, in general, when it comes to the services that it provides, the demand for those services are derived. So they generally depend on a demand of something else. So when we are looking at the benefits of the airline, we need to keep in mind that what other sectors will this airline impact? Because in general, when you look at the airline industry, it links to activities of other sectors. So on page 8, let me take you there, we have highlighted some of the things we considered to be the benefits of the airline. So briefly, I'll just address myself to the main topics indicated. The first one is that a national airline will give Zambia air transport presence and national pride. The air transport presence requirement became very evident during the COVID-19 pandemic, where it was noted that if you didn't have access to any airline, it was very expensive to find the transportation to bring in the necessary requirements during that time. So we are of the view that having air transport presence will be an added benefit to the country, considering that from the projections being made, the aspects of pandemic is going to be with us for a long time. B, regional transport hub. This was considered in the context that as Zambia being central and having links to 8 countries, from the middle to each of those 8 countries, you take about 2 hours air transport. We also looked at it from the fact that Zambia is part of the global village, having signed the African Continental Free Trade Area, and of course the COMESA. We are riding on the fact that if the manufacturing sector does improve and we become a manufacturing hub, the transport sector is going to be very critical to feed all the 8 countries around Zambia. C, facilitation of people, goods, and services movement across African continent. As we open up and as we ascend to the open skies, I think movement of people is going to increase, and the quickest way to move around the region will soon be air transport. So we feel we are going to benefit from that aspect. Then creation of an air travel culture. As I indicated, Chairperson, the demand for services for airline is derived. So it depends on the demand of something else. So if the economy improves in the country and economic activities start taking place throughout the country, we'll see that most people will have to move from different parts of the country to another part in the shortest possible time, and the easiest way is to use the air transport. So we are projecting that this is likely to happen in Zambia because as we did consider what we are trying to do as a country, we want to set up, I think, industrial yards in all the 116 districts. So once those activities are in place, you do not need to stay in that particular location to operate. You can move very easily. Then the fifth chairperson is employment opportunities for Zambians. Any airline industry will have to employ quite a number of people for it to operate. They need ground personnel, they will need aircraft crew, and so on. So we are foreseeing that the establishment of this airline will create some employment opportunities. And the last benefit, Chair, that we highlighted on page 9 is promoting tourism industry. And promoting tourism industry requires that tourism industry becomes the leading factor. So we need to improve first the tourism industry, because people will not be attracted by the airline. They will be attracted by the tourism offerings that we are going to be giving. And that's what is going to lead to our airline industry having demand for its services. So, Chairperson, I quickly move to 2.3, which was on short and long-term mechanisms put in place to ensure profitability of Zambia Airways. I should point out on this aspect that it was a bit challenging. As indicated, the airline has only been in operation for 11 months. So in addressing this aspect, we did review what challenges the airlines in general face. And one of the things we found is that the airline industry has got very high fixed costs. So it's quite a costly business. And the second thing we found is that the airline industry, the management can only have control on the supply side. They have very minimum influence on the demand side. So their work must be to see to it that they manage the costs. Otherwise, the airline is going to operate very unprofitable. So in terms of the mechanisms that we were able to pick out when we discussed with the Zambia Airways management, were one, which is indicated on page 1, management structure. So what Zambia Airways wants to do is to ensure that its management structure is such that it makes decisions that are beneficial to the operation of the airline. So what insists on is to emulate what Ethiopian Airways has done to detach itself from political interference, to let the airline run as a business. So management, in terms of decision making, what they are emphasizing on should be such that they are not trying to appease any political points, let me put it that way. Then secondly, on the management structure on page 10, you will note that this being a joint venture in Zambia, being the majority shareholder, the expectation was that top management would be from the majority shareholder. That's what is done in industry. But Zambia and Ethiopian, the shareholders, they agreed that in order to reduce the challenges of a startup, we will allow the more experienced partner to appoint the top management, that is the chief executive chief executive officer, for the first 5 years. Thereafter, then the majority shareholders are going to be appointing the CEO. So that's where we stand at the moment. Chairperson, on page 10, 2.3, one of the measures has to do with the cost leadership. As alluded to, the airlines world over can only do what can enforce their costs. They can't rely on revenues because they have very little influence on influencing demand. So at Zambia Airways, what they have done is to look at ways in which they can reduce costs. One of the things which they are doing is firstly to see that some of the services that they contract out are to be done by the airline itself. To start with, they have decided to start in-house catering. And from our discussion with Zambia Airways, they did indicate that they have already made huge savings from that aspect. So that's on the cost leadership. Then third, diversified business model. This is coming from what Ethiopian Airways has been doing. Currently, Ethiopian Airways does make panel insulators for some Boeing aircrafts in Ibole, in Ethiopia. They have set up a factory. So they want to do the same thing in Zambia, where they venture in different industries that support the airline industry. So that they have that in the pipeline, and hopefully going forward, we'll see that they will actualize their diversified business model. So those are the three mechanisms that we were able to identify. So I bring you to 2.5, where we were requested to look at challenges faced by Zambia Airways and opportunities in its operations. Chairperson, we did identify 5 challenges that are presented on page 11. So on page 11, the first challenge is financial risk. Under this is one of the biggest external costs, which the airlines normally can't control. And for Zambia, this has to do with jet fuel. We know that for any airline, jet fuel is the largest component of its operation costs. So in Zambia already, the airline is experiencing most of the airlines, when we looked at some of them, the reasons why they fell, they closed, it's basically because they could not manage the cost of jet fuel. Then B, chairperson, it's lack of finances for expansion. This is a starting airline. So far, we only have 1 aircraft, and as indicated, I'm not sure whether the equity from Ethiopian Airline will add to that 1 aircraft, or we'll have to find the financing. But as of now, the airline is facing challenges in accessing financing for expansion. But we also note that ICAO, which is the International Commercial Airline Organization, does not encourage government-owned airlines to have tax waivers over private-owned airlines. So the issue of giving them tax waivers will not work in this respect. We have to be innovative to find intentions of Zambia Airways is to ensure that all the 8 provincial capitals are connected for domestic airlines. But at the moment, most of them cannot accommodate the current Zambia Airways aircraft. For some cases, you may find that the aerodromes simply lack firefighting equipment, so those need to be put in place. So we will need to move as quickly as possible to ensure that these domestic routes are opened up. The fourth chairperson is unavailable regional routes. The intentions of Zambia Airways is to start operating in all the routes the previous national airline operated on. So we need to ensure that we start the regional airlines. They could have started the South African route, but the challenge Zambia Airways has faced is getting the license to operate on the South African route. This is despite the fact that Zambia has allowed South African airlines to operate in this country. We've even given them permission to even take passengers from Zambia to other routes. Generally, they will simply bring and they go back. So they're having that challenge. According to Zambia Airways, they have presented their case to the relevant authorities in this country, but nothing seems to be moving. Then the last challenge that was noted is increased competition. This is expected because in the airline industry, if you note the product is homogeneous, you won't find much differences. So we expect that competition will increase, and am I running out of time? No, please. Okay. And the fact that we've opened up the skies, that we have adopted open skies policy through our membership to COMESA and the African Free Trade Area. They are also encouraging that we open up this. So we'll see foreign airlines coming into Zambia without any restrictions. So there will be increased competition. We need to prepare for that so that we are able to compete. Chairperson, on page 12, we provide some opportunities, 5 of them as well. So very quickly, the first opportunity that Zambia Airways has is to do with the faster technology transfer from Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines has proved to be a resilient airline. During COVID-19, they were able to quickly switch and they started focusing on cargo and maintained their books in the positive. So it's one of the profitable airlines who need to emulate what they are doing. And secondly, by getting airplanes from them where we are leasing, we are able to easily have our people, the crew, the maintenance staff get to know how to maintain our aircraft as quickly as possible. Then B, customer loyalty. Zambia Airways business model of affordable flights. We are of the view that this provides an opportunity to build the customer loyalty. This goes a long way in maintaining a certain level of revenue for the airline. C, targeting other revenue sources. This has to do with their business, diversified business model. So they have to look at what other revenue sources can they tap in? So that is another opportunity. As Zambia, if we look at services to the airline industry, they are very limited. So it's a very fertile ground for the airline. Then D, expanding regionally. Besides the South African route I've talked about, there is also the aspect of tapping into the other capital cities. This we can do if we take advantage of the open skies policy that we have adopted, because that allows us to operate unrestricted to other countries. Then E, growth in the tourism industry. We know that Ethiopian Airways has been instrumental in promoting the Ethiopian tourism industry. We can equally do the same here. And since we are going to operate as a hub with the Ethiopian Airways, we can leverage on their international routes to quickly start bringing in international tourists. Chairperson, let me now go to the last aspect that was given to us to look at, that is to do with recommendations on how to enhance the management and operations of Zambia Airways. Having looked at all the previous three aspects, we did identify a number of things that need to be put in place so that we can help Zambia Airways find its feet in this very competitive industry. The first one, which we wanted to emphasize, is that the management of the airline must not be subjected to any government interference. That is going to go a long way in ensuring that the airline runs as a business, and hopefully we'll soon start seeing that the returns are in the positive. The second recommendation, Chairperson, that we are making is that we need to have a clear sustainability framework in place if this airline has to be successful. We've alluded to the fact that one of the external factors, external costs that airlines are subjected to has to do with fuel. So we are recommending that probably we put in a strategy, which other airlines have done, where you negotiate the price for a longer period of time, and you buy fuel at that price irrespective of the changes in fuel. That is done by other airlines in the world. Page 13. The third recommendation that we are making, again, this borders on what we reviewed when we looked at our airline industry, where we found that most of these airlines industries were affording up because of costs. We are recommending that to support the local airlines, we can give them a different rate for airport charges. We are proposing a 50% rate for the local airlines. That is C. And our fourth recommendation, we are looking at how we can stimulate demand for airline services. So under the fourth, we are encouraging that facilities and services that are for the tourism infrastructure must be promoted to the local population, where we can have separate charges for locals, particularly for accommodation and the rates to visit these tourist attractions. This is going to lead to increased demand for tourism, and the airline would derive its demand for the services. The fifth chairperson has to do with our domestic infrastructure for airlines for the 8 provincials where we found that 7 of them are still not up to standard. So we are recommending that government must ensure each provincial aerodrome is upgraded to at least grade 5 so that we open up domestic routes. The sixth recommendation we are making has to do with our inability to open up regional routes to Zambia Airways. So we are recommending that we review and assess the effects of existing bilateral air services agreements on airline competition. This is in view of what is happening where Zambia Airways has failed to enter the South African route. The seventh chairperson, we are alluding to the fact that we also need to have staff trained for our local airlines. So we are recommending that in order to promote broad aviation sector training, it will be more cost effective for basic level skills training to be supplied by the TVET institution, because we looked at their capabilities at the moment. Then for skilled, probably to start with, we can use foreign institutions, but as we grow our capacity, that can also be taken over by the local institution. Then the last recommendation, Chairperson, is to do with the diversified model that Zambia Airways intends to implement. We are making one recommendation which they didn't mention, but we feel it is an important aspect that they set up a servicing and painting plant looking at the climatic conditions Zambia enjoys. The climate in Zambia is very ideal because it will not be leading to products being subjected to more moisture and affecting the final product. Chairperson, at this point, I wish to submit the submission that the University of Zambia team made in response to the request from your committee. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I would like to first of all to apologize. I was supposed to have informed you that you were live on Chipeko. The whole country, the whole world was watching you. Chipeko is a television. I'm sure you know. Those who don't know, Honorable Chanda, Chipeko is television. Yeah. So we are live on TV. So honorable colleagues, any points of clarifications from the submission? I've seen Honorable Dr. Chewe and then Honorable Smoshi, in that order.
Thank you, Chair, for permitting me to ask the University of Zambia for the good presentation that they have presented before this committee. Witness, I would like to take you on page 12, where you talk of issue of clear sustainability framework on the operation of Zambia Airways. Yes, we need to have a clear framework so that we can able to operate effectively, especially this partnership between Ethiopian Airways and Zambia Airways. Now, there is this issue of fuel, as you have alluded. In your opinion, this suggestion to enter into private fuel arrangement with private, would you think it can work? And if so, what measures that the two parties can put in place to ensure that the price is maintained? I'm asking this question, Chair, looking at the fluctuation of prices on the market. If you look at the price in USA today, you're talking about almost $4 per liter. Again, if you look at within the region, that is Africa, you find that our colleagues in Tanzania is almost $2. So my question is, how can we make sure that this is achieved? Thank you.
And maybe before Honorable Smith comes in, I would like to ask my colleagues who joined us later to introduce themselves for the benefit, so that when we meet outside, we're going to know each other by name, not only by face. So I would ask you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Joseph S. Musanje, Member of Parliament from Babara constituency in Choma. Glad to meet your witnesses.
Thank you, Chair. Sialuba Gift, Member of Parliament for Senazongo constituency.
My name is Sandy Chanda, Member of Parliament, Kanchibia constituency.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Frank Simoshi, Member of Parliament for Skongo constituency.
And you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that lovely presentation. My question is based on the fact that Zambia is the main major shareholder in this partnership. And it appears from previous witnesses that have come here who have mentioned that it seems we have given out too much, despite the fact that we are the major shareholders. And I want to bring you to the fact that the plane that is being used, the Q400, is being leased from Ethiopian Airways. And the claim is that we are paying too much money on that, to the fact that for them, they don't mind whether we are making a loss on the transportation of course, people flights, for as long as they're able to break money from the lease, which we, Zambians are paying. Maybe a comment on that.
I think we can do maybe 3, then again we'll proceed to Honorable Sunday.
Thank you so much, Chair. And to the University of Zambia, thank you so much for this presentation. My question would be: Ethiopian Airlines is operating more or less in the same region as Zambia Airways is, and we know that they're also running Malawi Airlines. Zambia Airways, on one hand, would wish to grow and become an airline of choice. Would it be in its interest to see a thriving and a competitive Zambia Airways, if it came to that? My second question, with indulgence of the Chair, would be that at the moment Zambia Airways is operating as a private business, and yet it's our national flag carrier. What would be your guidance on whether or not we need to have a particular law, an act of parliament, to define and protect the interests of Zambia Airways at this stage? Chair, thank you.
Thank you. I think you can attend to those. Then we'll have another second round of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Now ask the Professor Chamino to respond.
Thank you very much. I'll go through the questions from the beginning. The first one had to do with the sustainability framework vis-a-vis the cost of fuel. Firstly, the private private fuel tank doesn't mean that fuel will necessarily have to come from the private sector. But now, this practice of agreeing on a fixed rate is done globally. For example, in 2008, some airlines in the US did agree on a fixed rate when the price of fuel globally was going up. So to protect their costs, because in the airline, the only thing that management can do is to manage its costs. In order to ensure that their costs are manageable, they did agree at a certain price. Then I think in 2009, the fuel price fell. And they had to continue paying at the same rate because the agreement was for 3 years. So these are just things where airlines can negotiate. So the airline needs to negotiate to ensure stability in the factors that influence their costs. That is going to make it easy for them to manage costs. So this does not necessarily mean it has to be the private sector, but I do note that in Zambia now, in the procurement of fuel has been given to the OMCs. So definitely, as the Honorable has indicated, we have to deal with the private sector. Will they buy into this? Yes or no? That I can't tell. So it is a global practice. We can have a look at it. That's what we are recommending. The second one has to do with the shareholding. I think, in my view, to answer this one, we need to exactly understand how this shareholding has been agreed upon. I'm making comments on the understanding that the Zambian team that was negotiating had the interest of the country at heart. So that's how I'm making these comments. So the shareholding, Zambia put in, is it 30 million US dollars as its equity. Ethiopian Airline put in lieu of financing, they brought an aircraft on board. So their equity is in terms of that aircraft. So what is going to happen, from my discussion with the people in the Zambian government, is that Ethiopian Airways pays the lease. We don't. So Zambia Airways is not paying anything. Ethiopian Airways pays the lease. And at the end, that aircraft will be Zambia Airways aircraft. That's why at the beginning, I did point out that unfortunately, we did not see that agreement to see whether the equity side of Ethiopian Airways is only that single aircraft, or is it going to be other aircraft? For example, if today we get access to the South African route, we definitely need another aircraft. Is the second aircraft, which will be brought on board, going to be part of ET, equity within the 45%? So that is subject to how we negotiated. But as I've indicated, I'm making these comments on the belief that the Zambian side that was negotiating did do due diligence to ensure that the country benefits. So in terms of leasing costs, vis-a-vis these equities, Zambia Airways is not paying anything, and at the end, the current aircraft will be Zambia Airways asset. The second part, I needed to check if financial reports were available. But since this airline only started operating for 11 months, was to check whether this aircraft is being included as an asset. In the practice, is when you are leasing from a leasing company, the airline is not included as an asset because it's not yours. But since this aircraft is going to be ours, is it being included in accounting as our asset or not? Because each partner's equity must be accounted for. So that we didn't have a chance to look at because there were no financial reports out. They had not clocked one financial year yet. Probably going forward, that's one thing which needs to be looked at. So that's the second. The third has to do with it as a competitor. I think when an airline decides to buy equity in another airline, they have seen that that airline has a promising future. There will be positive returns, and you will have to share according to your equity of that airline. So I'm of the view, to start with, that Ethiopian Airways has become a partner, as an equity partner, because they have seen Zambia Airways as a bright future, and they are bound to benefit from the returns. Equally, Zambia should benefit from the returns of the performance of Zambia Airways. Now, at the moment, vis-a-vis the routes, of course, in this region, Zambia Airways has a very higher chance of establishing routes in the region than Ethiopian Airways. Ethiopian Airways runs a hub at Bole with different international routes. So they have picked Zambia Airways, Zambia. Malawi was picked area before Zambia. Then in West Africa, they also did create small hubs. So the business model that Ethiopian Airways is using is the hub and spoke model. In a way, when you look at the arrangement, Ethiopian Airways now looks as the bigger player in this arrangement. Zambia Airways will only be linking routes from Lusaka as the main regional hub to the different regional towns, capital cities. So if Ethiopian Airways want to access, for example, South Africa, then they have to bring to Lusaka. Zambia Airways picks from Lusaka and takes them there. So I do not think there will be direct competition between the two because they have to work together. In the airline industry, besides what Zambia Airways is doing this joint venture, there are a number of ways in which airlines cooperate. We have co-chair. I'm sure some of you have gone, you want to go on, let's say, Emirates. Then you find that checking in, it's people from another airline who are checking you in Emirates because they have a code share, they share a code. There are these cooperations that are done in the airline industry. But as a joint venture, we need to still, this brings me to the fourth point, Honorable Sunday, and arrest the interests of Zambians. In our presentation, we have recommended that we should minimize government interference. So meaning we let the company run as independently as possible. The joint venture as a board, Zambia being a majority shareholder, we have majority board members. The chairperson comes from the majority shareholders. So my belief is that those board members are representing the interests of Zambians as they make decisions on the operations of this company. So, in as far as the interests are concerned, I think we need to ensure that on our side, the people we appoint on the board are people with credibility, people who can represent the interests of this country. That is very critical. Otherwise, yes, indeed, we will not benefit from this airline. So the concern that as a major shareholder, Ethiopian Airways is benefiting and we are not benefiting. If that comes to pass, I will always lay the blame on our representation on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have overshot. So the last round, please straight to the point. Is a follow-up, but then I saw 3 names. Just a quick follow-up under 10 seconds. Then we'll go to Honorable Samakai, Honorable Madam Sonda, and then Honorable Siabaro, the last one.
Thank you, Chair, for the discretion. A follow-up question would be that the feared monopoly going into the future, and if the JV was to collapse, what becomes of Zambia Airways? But over and beyond that, what would be the role, from UNZA's perspective, what would be the role of the former Zambia Airways pilots, engineers in the new Zambia Airways? How do we take care and how do we make use of that institutional memory from the old Zambia Airways? Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Professor, you said that because Ethiopia has experience and therefore they take up the position of managing director, what's the configuration of the top management of the Zambia Airways? What are the ratios between Ethiopia and Zambia in terms of management? You also say that we need to open up regional routes, that is local, provincial headquarters. Are you not thinking that this should be based on the business attractiveness of these various provinces? Because I'm aware that Prof. Wright was going to most of these provincial capitals, and thereafter they closed it down on account of lack of business. The third question is, would you come out clearly on the issue of equity and leasing? It is said that Zambian Airways is leasing an aircraft from Ethiopian Airways, and therefore Zambia has put up cash in this whole arrangement. So how is this leasing come out if the aircraft is the contribution from Ethiopia? How is this leasing? I think is confusing people. It's like they have brought an aircraft and therefore we are paying them rentals or whatever. So would you come out so that Zambians out there are clear about this whole arrangement?
Thank you. There's a lot of questions. Honorable Sonda.
Thank you, Chair.
So many questions.
Chair, I wanted to find out from Professor Siaminwa, during the operations of the then Zambia Airways from 1967 to 1994, did they set up a leasing and a painting plant in Zambia during that period when the Zambia Airways was operating? Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. That's good.
I'll be quick. Witness, once bitten, twice shy. We've had Zambia Airways, which was wholly owned by the Republic of Zambia. What we saw was we failed actually to keep it. Now we are in a situation where we have, I can say, minority shareholder. The Ethiopian air companies owning a big chunk of shares, do you see us succeeding? We have the infrastructure which is wholly owned by Zambia, which is the airports. Now we are just relying on one airline. That's one. Airplane, sorry. One. Do you see us succeeding, or to be another sad story for Zambia as of nature?
Thank you very much. Please, you can attend to those.
Thank you. I'll start with the last question from Honorable. I'm from Sinazongo as well. Yeah, we are the majority shareholders according to the JV, but I did indicate in my presentation that we were not able to see the JV, what was signed exactly in terms of how this is going to play out for the equity. Probably Honorable is foretelling. Suppose it brings additional aircraft, will they now claim that we have major shareholders because we have brought more planes on board? The success of the airline will depend on how we run it. And that largely depends on how IDC, who are mandated to oversee SOEs, how they ensure that our SOEs are being managed correctly. I have indicated that the airline industry is very competitive because it has a high fixed cost. If they open up so many routes, they have to employ people in all those routes. They have to have ground infrastructure, equipment in all those routes. If an aircraft lifts off, it will have to have a full complement of the crew because we are running a full service airline. So it depends on how we are going to run it. That's what will lead to the success of this. So let's hope we'll get the competent people on board, which touches a bit what Honorable Sunday indicated on the former Zambia Airways. Let's hope we can get competent people on board with the shortest possible period for training. So if you pick the formers, they will want to have a long training period. So probably that's what I can say on the first. The third was on the former Zambia Airways, whether it did diversify into other services to the airline industries. For example, doing the painting and servicing. Definitely in terms of aircraft servicing, we were able to do that locally. Unless there were some other specialized that we couldn't do, then we'll take it to Boeing. We will fly it there. But I don't think, although we didn't do the research, I don't think Zambia Airways did adopt a business model where they wanted to diversify and bring on board other services, other than simply concentrating on their core business of passenger and cargo services. So we are not very sure on that one, unless maybe Dr. Nimbiri, if you know something about Zambia Airways having diversified. So that's what I can say on the third. Then the heavily loaded, thank you, Chair, for having observed that. I was getting worried. How am I going to survive on this? So, Chair, let me maybe say what I understand. Because Honorable here was talking about Zambia paying, then Ethiopian Airways brings the aircraft not clear. But in my submission, as I was explaining, I also indicated that it would have been been much easier for me if I had seen the financial reports to see whether this aircraft already been taken as an asset by Airways. Is it appearing in the books? Because if you are simply leasing, it means it's not your asset. It will not appear in your books. But since this agreement, according to the information we got from the Ministry of Transport and Logistics, once, I don't know how much they have paid it at, once that payment is finished, then the aircraft becomes the Zambia Airways asset, which will be appearing on the book. But as it is, since it is a shareholder, in my view, unless I'm wrong, it should start appearing on our books so that we know this is ours and not it. Now, what it is, Honorable, when you set up a company, you decide what are the shares for this company, what is the value. So, according to the agreement, then, with 300 million, is it 300 million or 30 million US dollars is equivalent to shares that will give you 55% equity. So it means they must have also looked at the value of what it is bringing, because that airplane is ET airplane. So we are buying it through a lease arrangement according to this JV. So at the end of it, it becomes our aircraft. But I don't know whether it's only this aircraft or not. So we need to look at that joint venture agreement vis-a-vis the equity, so that is clarified. So that's on the equity. Then the other aspect was on the provincial headquarters, and indicating the fact that ProFlight was going to all this. There are no more. Chairperson, I did indicate that for any airline, there are two sides, supply and demand. An airline has control over supply. They can decide how many planes they make available, how many seats, whatever. But demand is derived. They have no influence. So what it is, we need to create a demand for which the people being attracted to that need to have quick travel time. Then Zambia Airways will derive the demand. So I mentioned that as a country, we have decided that we need to bring up industries in all the 116 districts, and we've tasked CEEC to start setting up industrial yards. What is important is to stimulate activities in those provinces. If there are no service activities, economic activities, there won't be anything attracting people to travel there. Then there won't be any service demand for Zambia Airways. It means they can't go to all those regional provinces. So I believe Zambia Airways is going to be opening up domestic routes depending on the demand for its services. Zambia Airways' position is that we are not going to go for smaller aircrafts to accommodate smaller number of volumes. So they will not be focusing on unit revenue. What they want is to see that they assist in promoting interest in air travel. And that's why we did mention on their mechanism promoting the travel culture. That idea is to try and improve the margins, not the unit cost, because you may be having very few people traveling, but what would be your that we are going to get at the end of it all. So, seriously speaking, for opening up these domestic routes, it will depend on the what us as a country do to stimulate economic activities in those areas, and that is going to lead to demand for air transport. I think that's for the provincial routes. Then on the management structure, again, we are all agreed on one point. Any majority shareholder dictates. You decide who runs the company day to day. So your management structure must reflect the majority shareholder. But from my discussion, both at the ministry and the Zambia Airways, what was made clear to me is that the Zambian side did agree that because this is a start and we don't want to hit a lot of bumps, can we ride on the more experienced partner? And they agreed that for the first 5 years of operation, top management is going to come from Ethiopian Airways. So far, I may not be able to answer the aspect of what is the ratio. The board should be able to give us that. But what I know, the CEO is from the Ethiopian side. In my meeting where I met the CEO, there were two Zambians, the manager for finance and the operations manager. They are both Zambians. But I don't know the other directors, whether they are Zambians or non-Zambians. But I know that in as far as the agreement is set, the CEO for the first 5 years is from Ethiopia. So the current CEO started work on the 1st of January 2022 when operations but the full structure, I think the board or the company can give us that. We don't have that information. Then finally, quickly, just to come to Honorable Sunday Chanda's concern, what will happen if the equity agreement falls apart? I'm hoping this is going to be a long haul arrangement, but I'm sure by then we would have found some fit. If it fails within 5 years, then we'll be in trouble because we wouldn't have put top management to run it. But if it fails after 5 years, I'm hoping Zambians would have been running the company and we can continue running the company on our own. So that's my hope. Monopoly in the airline industry is very difficult. Generally, it's very difficult because of international agreements that are put in place. At the beginning, when I was presenting on the legal and policy frameworks, I did indicate that this is highly regulated. So where monopolistic tendencies are observed, international bodies do come in. No such things taking place. So we shouldn't worry much on the monopoly. The biggest challenge is what we have recommended to review these bilateral agreements so that we are able to open regional routes. But the open skies policy is changing how airlines operate now. Because once countries assent to that policy, then they reduce restrictions from foreign countries. You can move into another country without restrictions. So what we need to do is just to keep our eyes open and respond to the changing environment in the broader perspective, the aviation industry, and specifically the airline industry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. You've taken almost 2 hours. Other colleagues are waiting outside. I think for that long deliberation, please don't forget your water, and there's also tea outside served for you, waiting for you, so that you can have a cup of tea with members of colleagues. Honorable members, we can have a 2 or 3 minutes break, then get a cup of tea, then we come back and continue. Just get our cup of tea and say bye to our learned men. Thank you, but before you leave, the minute is withdrawn. You'll find it next time when you come. Thank you.
Welcome to the place where dreams come true, where everything you want can be yours. I'm going straight to the top. I don't know how it stopped. I did or not. I got some goals that I'm hitting. You hear what I'm spitting?
I was in before you even invited me. That's how in I'm in.
Real food cooked by real people in their real home.
What else matters in life?
What is that?
Your boy has blown up.
And that's why I gotta be first. It's brand new entertainment for a brand new you this 2023. Join dancing sensation Otima Busa as she travels through South Africa, introducing us to friends and family.
Growing up good was never enough. We had to push ourselves. We had to be the best.
Fire up a feast. She creates mouth-watering from brilliant breakfasts to delicious desserts.
My favorite thing about this recipe is barbecue repertoire without me later.
Humiliated detective gets banished to the town of Three Pines to solve a series of gruesome murders.
Secrets lead to lies. The truth is in what we don't see.
And dive into the dangerous with an exhilarating expedition from Seattle to Russia for Human Story Saturday.
Walking through these temple and garden grounds, you feel kind of this zen.
Stay connected to the best TV for your best 2023 with ESTV.
With a dark cloud around her, it seemed all hope was lost.
The controversial film that's fun to play.
It was thought that she will remain caged in her guilt, only for her to be released to redefine who she is.
Iris Diamond has walked out of prison.
And now, she's ready to tell her side of the story. See Iris and her family like never before. There's more to Iris than meets the eye. Do you want to keep the good times rolling? Then pay and get bumped up to a higher package. Nimbasela na Futi by GoTV. Because when you pay your subscription, you get bumped up to the next higher package for free. To get more than enough of only the best entertainment on
wants to live on its own, want to be on its own. They don't look to others as also fellow human beings, God's children at all. They get divided, they begin fighting, they begin destroying each other across tribes. So it is a very dangerous group of human beings on earth, not only in Zambia, all over the world, where people are divided according to tribes. We saw that if we do not bring up the importance of our nation, we'll be a divided people. A divided people mean we cannot live together. We'll be fighting each other across tribes. To destroy that, we say we build this one Zambia, one nation approach. Looking at tribes, not as a way of life, but nation as a way of life. So we're going to one Zambia, one nation. One Zambia, one nation. One Zambia, one nation. We built up in a very strong way. So today, those 33 tribes of Zambia are very united. Very united. Yes, there are some people who are still weak in looking at tribes as their way of life. All of us as tribes could come together to build one. There is no other way of the forces of patriotism succeeding in society without those in leadership living in such a way as to be patriotic themselves. If leaders are not patriotic, nobody else will learn how to do good things towards other human beings. If you're not a patriot, if you don't develop in life, then you are destroying the nation as a whole. So patriotism is a force that brings out success in any situation. Patriotism is very key of things living together, human beings working together, human beings developing things together. Without that spirit of patriotism, we can't go very far.
My name's Marjorie Nakaponda. I was born in 1963. In a family, we are 8. 4 girls, 4 boys. I'm the firstborn. I started my grade 1 in 1971 at Rwanda Primary School in Isoka. In 1978, I went at retired ones who had high marks. I completed my secondary school in 1982, from 1978 to at Nambodi as a cashier. I worked for 4 years, from 1984 to 1988. We were declared redundant. That time, I was already married to Mr. Kashinka, my husband, and I had 2 children, a boy and a girl. In 1988, I went for nursing school. I applied as a nurse, school of nursing, and I completed the nursing in 1990. 1991, I started work at Isoka General Hospital. I worked there for 7 years. We were transferred to Isoka. When I went to Chinsali, I continued as a nurse. After some time, I applied for unpaid leave and started something that I wanted to do. In 1912, I was appointed as a diplomat by His Excellency, the late Michael Tufiasata.
So much. We want to welcome the witness. Apologies that we overran with the previous witness. I think there was a lot of interrogation to be done. So it was not the intention of this committee to keep you waiting. We understand that time is money in civil aviation. So sincere apologies. But we want to welcome you to this committee, and we value your presence. We know that you are going to add value to the subject matter to allow us, come up with a solid report for Madam Speaker, as we laid on the floor of the House, that it's going to be a report that will speak to the aspirations of the Zambian people. And maybe even before we go any further, let me just inform you that under Cap 12 of the laws of Zambia, you do have the immunity. As you know that when a committee is sitting in the manner that we are sitting, by extension, the same immunity as it applies to members of parliament does apply to you. So for whatever you're going to say during this particular hearing, none of it would be used against you in any court of law, unless you deliberately choose to mislead this committee. Then sanctions would accrue, and the same Cap 12 would be used against you. We have no doubt, however, that it would not be the intention of the Civil Aviation Authority to deliberately mislead this committee. We believe that your interaction with us will be based on truth and nothing else but the truth. And of course, we also solicit for your opinions on particular matters, as a case, from time to time during this collaboration. So that immunity is conferred on you, as is conferred and enjoyed by the members of parliament from this point onwards. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, and thereafter the members of parliament and members of the committee will introduce themselves. There are some of our colleagues who join us at a later stage, but I think we are good enough to start. Over to you, witness. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, committee members. My name is Gabriel Lessa, and I'm the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority. I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the members. My name is Mulonda Mulonda. I'm the Director of Flight Safety Standards at the Civil Aviation Authority.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Sepiso Zimba. I'm the Public Relations Manager at the Civil Aviation Authority.
To ask members to introduce themselves, I'll start with my immediate left. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm Sialu Gift, Member of Parliament for Sanazongo constituency and a member of this committee.
I'm Frank Simushi, Member of Parliament for Skongo constituency and a member of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Newton Samagai, Member of Parliament for Mununga constituency in the Northwestern Province, and I'm part of this committee.
Honorable Member, may I wish to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, witness. I'm Honorable Dr. Carol Chewe, Member of Parliament for Vanseshi constituency, and I sit on this committee. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome back, witness. I'm Joseph S. Muzanje, Member of Parliament from Balaya constituency in Toba. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, witness. My name is Darius Kunda. I'm coming from the Office of the Clerk.
Thank you, and my name is Sandy Chanda, Member of Parliament for Kanchibia constituency, Vice Chairperson for this committee. Our substantive chair is attending to other matters. He might join us at a later stage. So, witness, the floor is all yours. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. May I salute the honorable members of the Committee on Transport, Works and Supply, and allow me this chance to thank you for according the Civil Aviation Authority this rare opportunity to submit a memorandum on the operations and management of Zambia Airways. The Zambian government is building up upon the potential of Zambia being land-linked to our 8 neighboring countries, giving the country its strategic central position and capacity to interlink all these countries' transport networks. The government's long-term vision is to transform Zambia into a regional transport hub for all transport modes, namely air, road, rail, and water. And Lusaka, honorable members, is essentially 2 hours of flight from the capitals of our neighboring countries. And I may add that air transport is not only the fastest and safest mode of transport, but also the most economical when you consider the savings made in the economy in terms of time and loss of human capital to surface transport accidents. This is why the government has identified aviation as a key catalyst in the sustainable development of the Zambian economy. Chair and the committee want to talk about the adequacy of the policy and the legal framework governing the operations and management of Zambia Airways. The policy and legal framework governing the operations and management of Zambia Airways is adequate and is in place. The establishment of Zambia Airways was supported by the policy objectives of creating a competitive environment to ensure safe, efficient, and affordable air services and to attract private investments in the aviation sector. And the committee's aviation has continued to expand. It has weathered crises such as COVID-19 and demonstrated long-term resilience, becoming an indispensable means of transport. Historically, air transport has doubled in size every 15 years and has grown faster than most of other industries. And aviation is also a major contributor to global economic prosperity, provides the only rapid worldwide transportation network, which makes it essential for global business. It generates economic growth,
creates jobs and facilitates international trade and tourism. Chair, in terms of the policy, we've got the 8th National Development Plan, the Vision 2030, the Zambia National Transportation Master Plan, which I will speak to. Under the 8th National Development Chair and the Committee, the legal and policy framework provides for a coordinated and integrated national development planning process that is participatory, responsive, and result-oriented. One of the 4 strategic development areas identified in the plan is economic transformation and job creation, of which tourism is a driver, transport and logistics an enabler, and aviation development a key program and part of the transformation of Zambia as a regional transport and logistics hub. Kenneth Kaunda International Airport has undergone massive infrastructure development to position it to become a regional aviation hub. Zambia Airways is critical to this endeavor, and its efficiency and effectiveness will help maximize the utilization of Kenneth Kaunda and other Zambian airports. The government has identified as a way to diversify the economy, establishment of a national airline that is critical to transportation of passengers and cargo. And the focus should be on acquiring aircraft to service domestic, regional, and intercontinental routes. The intent of the 8th National Development Plan could not have been more directed, as Zambia Airways will unlock agricultural markets, the tourism potential, and trade and commerce in the region and beyond. Zambia Airways Chair and the Committee on a macro scale broadly support the drivers of the Zambian economy, such as tourism and agriculture, thereby improving the economic performance. On the microeconomic scale, Zambia Airways, when run prudently as a business entity, will create value by making profit, paying taxes, and creating employment for the Zambian citizens. In terms of Vision 2030, the theme of the 8th National Development Plan emphasizes the need to build and get back on track towards the realization of Vision 2030 through economic recovery, stabilization, and steady growth, coupled with intervention in the social sectors to realize socio-economic transformation that will ultimately uplift the livelihoods of the Zambian people. The vision highlights 3 scenarios outlining development options, namely the baseline, the preferred, and optimistic. The socio-economic development objectives enshrined in the preferred scenario are to attain and sustain annual growth, real growth of 6% between 2006 to 2010, 8% 2011 to 2015, 9% 2016 to 2020, and 10% between 2021 and 2030. To attain and maintain a moderate inflation of 5%, reduce the national poverty headcount of less than 40% of the 20% of the population, and reduce income inequalities measured by the Gini coefficient of less than 40, to provide secure access to safe potable water, and others. Now, if Zambia is to continue to post-COVID-19, obtaining progressive, increasing annual real growth of over 8%, it is imperative that Zambia improves its economic productivity. As productivity is a function of time and actual production, aviation transportation is truly an enabler of enhanced productivity by reducing unproductive time in all sectors. Currently, most people take between 6 to 12 hours to travel between Zambian cities or towns. Aviation can reduce these unproductive times to between 30 minutes to an hour, thereby releasing more productive time to productive activities. In this vein, Zambia Airways is not only inevitable but also a means to integrate Zambia to the rest of the world, promote tourism, like we said, agriculture, trade and commerce, and also provide employment for the Zambian citizens, which hitherto has been exported to foreign carriers nations, thereby reducing poverty. Zambia Airways should stem the part of the silent capital flights through the sales of tickets by foreign carriers by retaining some of the total ticket sales in Zambia. Chair, I'll now talk about the Zambia National Transportation Master Plan. The plan identifies that upgrading the status of the civil aviation sector widens the scope of opportunities of sectors such as tourism and international business, whose growth and development is reliant on an efficient and competitive air transport environment. The Zambian National Transportation Plan recognizes the importance of a competitive air transport environment as an enabler of other sectors' development. The national airline is the only major means by which Zambia can ensure a competitive and efficient air transport environment. In terms of the benefits of a national airline in Zambia, a functional and efficient Zambia Airways will enable Zambia to harvest enormous potential in passenger traffic and take advantage of the benefits of existing treaties, protocols, and agreements entered into. These rights and privileges will accrue to the Zambian economy through job creation, skills, and technology transfer, promotion of tourism, facilitation of trade and commerce, foreign exchange earnings and taxes, cultural exchanges, indirect benefits, facilitation and regional and international cooperation, promotion of exports, and reduction in incidences of capital flight. Zambia has a lot to offer to foreign travelers, either for tourism purposes or increasingly business opportunities. The Zambian economy has on the whole been expanding in recent years, so increasing our air links could have a transformational effect. According to IATA, journeys between countries in Asia and Africa were the fastest growing intercontinental routes, and there is no reason why this should let up post-COVID-19. And in particular, an IATA country snapshot of Zambia at its IATA Day in 2017 in June highlighted the great potential in aviation for Zambia as it projected the passenger forecast 5-year cumulative annual growth rate percentage for world growth at 4.8, Africa and Middle East at 7.1, but for Zambia it stood at 13% year-on-year growth. This empirical evidence should encourage Zambia to focus more on investing in aviation and unlocking its potential. Zambia has shown strong commitment to aviation infrastructure development and sustainable aviation development. What remains is to leverage this world-class infrastructure and the potential growth in passenger traffic and reap the benefits therefrom. The Zambian aviation sector is poised to grow at a fast pace based on IATA projections of 13% passenger traffic growth year-on-year, notwithstanding the bump of COVID-19. Chair, in terms of the provincial economic expos recently conducted have also revealed that Zambia's economic potential has largely been untapped. One of the identified constraints has been lack of efficient and affordable means to transport and connect people and goods in this vast country, which is endowed with exciting and unbelievable natural wonders and resources. Zambia Airways seems to be a viable option to bridge this gap which continues to stifle and frustrate Zambia's capacity to exploit and benefit from its natural endowments. In terms of agriculture, the 8th National Development Plan identified agriculture as a key driver of Zambia's economic development. And looking in the past, during the defunct Zambia Airways, horticultural products such as green vegetables, fresh flowers, and fresh fruits had a captive market in Europe in places like Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Larnaca, London, and Rome. This captive market was lost with the demise of the national airline, and the biggest producer, Agriflora, also went down. It is anticipated that Zambia Airways will spur the growth of the horticultural sector, a significant foreign exchange earner, and the agro sector in general, to accelerate the growth of the sector and its contribution to the national economy. In terms of the short and long-term mechanisms put in place to ensure profitability of the airline, the initiative of establishing the public-private partnership dialogue forum to reduce the cost of doing business will private sector players to procure the Zambia Airways business, like it helps to reduce aircraft based on business demand, should be the norm followed by Zambia Airways. And the high effective implementation of ICAO standards and recommended practices, which as an authority we push for, creates a conducive environment for Zambia. Then provision of offices and hangar by government, requirement to start operations with new aircraft is extremely important to reduce the maintenance cost. And the stable economic fundamentals in Zambia also helps. Then there is the improved airport infrastructure and government will and support. In terms of challenges by Zambia Airways and opportunities in its operations and challenges, Chair and the committee, I think the main challenges is the high cost of aviation fuel. In order for Zambia Airways to achieve the highest degree of efficiency and profitability, there is need to formulate policies and regulations on charges, jet fuel, and incentives to improve the performance of the aviation sector and maximize the economic benefits to Zambia. Then support services institutions' capacity such as ZASTI, the single African air transport market, and economic regulation of air transport. In terms of ZASTI, Chair, I would venture to report that the time we submitted this, the situation on the ground has changed, because the minister has directed now that the Civil Aviation Authority should take over ZASTI and bring it towards class standard. And this constraint which we looked at now should be managed properly. Then in terms of the high cost of landing and handling charges, the government through the PPDF has devised the means to bring together different stakeholders to ascertain methodologies of reducing the cost of doing business and reducing the cost of the flight fare in aviation. Then one of the challenges will be high competition. Zambia as a destination is attracting very key big airlines, and Zambia Airways will learn to swim with the sharks. So certainly the high competition will be a challenge, and they will need to rise to the occasion. Then in aviation, there are also low profit margins and high input costs. But aside from the challenges, Chair and the committee, there are opportunities. Zambia's central geographical location is ideally suited for it to be a regional aviation hub, and Zambia Airways could be the main hub carrier. Zambia has a real and latent cargo processing and transportation potential because of our good land and rainfall patterns. Zambia's potential compounded annual growth rate in passenger traffic as projected by IATA of 13% year on year, notwithstanding COVID, means the potential for growth in passenger numbers is very high, and Zambia should harvest that. Then Zambia was also identified as being among the only 15 African countries who were ready and willing to fully implement SATEM and reap the benefits thereof. Zambia is now a part of the project implementation plan for SATEM. We are about 18 countries now, and certainly this is going to open windows of opportunity for the airline. Then government goodwill and the massive infrastructure that has been developed, the high level of ICAO standards and recommended practices that have been implemented in Zambia, and then the multifaceted tourist attractions and natural endowments, low crime and the peaceful population, and the stable currency. In terms of recommendations on how to enhance the management and operations of Zambia Airways, Chair, the main recommendations, there are many, but their operation, management of the operation, it has to be properly focused, especially in areas such as maintenance of aircraft, because this actually affects the availability and the profitability of the national airline. Also, in terms of the management of its human capital, the personnel, the training, and the airport accommodation, and ensuring that Zambia Airways leads the passenger feel at the airport. Because whenever passengers come to the airport, they will associate the airport with Zambia Airways. So they will need to promote the airport feel. The passenger handling at the airport should be key. The resource management, the operational plan, and the management of the crew. Those are some of the things that actually cost money if not managed well. The detail is in here. I didn't want to go too much into the detail. Then in-flight provisioning and also management of the irregular operations. If they have to delay a flight, they need to manage it very, very cautiously because it impacts its fame. Then, Chair, there are certain key performance indicators which are critical. Its financial operating margin. The airline must achieve a consistently strong financial performance if it's to continue investing in its future success of the business. And the operating margin should be the main way of measuring its financial performance. Then in terms of customer satisfaction and recommendation, I think this is one big measure also of the airline success. For example, an on-board customer survey together with a follow-up online survey may be used on the arrival process, which may provide monthly insights into customer views. If Zambia is given very good custom by its passengers and others they talk to, it will actually ensure that they will be profitable. Then in terms of punctuality and ready to go, the availability when they say they will be going at this time, to manage the times and schedules. That also is very important. Then the employee commitment. They need to ensure that the airline tracks the opinions via an all-employee confidential survey to know whether their employees are in support or they are agitating. Then the key considerations by Zambia Airways should be operational, which involves operational safety and security management, which will be crucial to the sustainability of the airline. There are minimum acceptable safety and security margins, which will have to be maintained by the airline to both garner the traveler patronage as well as the regulatory acquiescence. Then organizational, obviously, the airline will need to only employ enough staff for what needs to be done. I think these are lessons from the defunct airline. Of course, for financial, like we said, they need to develop a financial sustainability plan, and they need to guard also their reputation jealously, like we said, because there will be its reputation both as a good employer and a service provider. Then, of course, in terms of other considerations, we said the Zambia Air Services Training Institute, ZASTI, is critical to the success of the airline. Now, this has been brought under the umbrella of the Civil Aviation Authority, and certainly we can promise that this is going to be transformed even according to the minister's expectations. Then Zambia is also needs to become a learning organization, because they should learn from other organizations and learn also lessons as they operate. They can only learn and become better. Of course, performance management to ensure that they can get appropriate performance from their workforce and from themselves. The chair and the committee. The committee is encouraged to support improvement in the management and operations of Zambia Airways to unlock Zambia's potential and facilitate for efficient business transactions. Also to ensure that the airline is run as a business entity free from any form of interference other than holding the office bearers accountable. Then, of course, good governance in terms of appointing competent men and women to the board of the airline to give the necessary support and checks to management. Then also to provide a wide policy on the role of aviation in the economy. I think this will help. An integrated, deliberate, and broad-based tax on aviation fuel could be reduced to make air travel affordable and enable the inclusiveness of most Zambians who have hitherto been priced out of flying, and relieve the pressure from the roads whilst facilitating efficiencies to business transactions in Zambia. The spin-offs from more business transactions should cover for the reduced tax. Then, if it is possible also to encourage the provision of incentives to Zambian startups such as Zambia Airways and others to provide a smooth start and ensure successful maturing into a strong business. And also to encourage the Buy Zambian, Fly Zambian and support them. I submit.
Witness, thank you so much for your input, your submission. Very solid recommendations coming from this memoranda. And now I'm going to open it up to members of the committee to interact with the witness. We'll allow for 3 questions at any given time. Please feel free to answer them as well as delegate where you think you need to delegate to other members of your committee. But I think at the end of the day, it's a solid input, solid feedback we're soliciting from your end. So I'll open it up. I see Honorable Sialvalo will go first. Honorable Sialvalo.
Thank you so much. Witness, it's the wish of every Zambian that Zambia Airways should flourish. There will be a lot of economically. Now, my source of concern, witness, is that apparently I'm one of those who were in the Zambia Airways when it had that scare. Now, what is lingering in other people's mind, including mine, as one of the people who uses Zambia Airways, is that why only one? What time do they service the aircraft? Almost a year clocking. There hasn't been any addition to another aircraft. Are we going in the right direction as a country? Is this not just one way of a failed project, so to speak? Because we need to know, Zambians, we look at even our vehicles. If you overuse a vehicle, it will just break down. Now, looking at the way we are trading as Zambia Airways, which is Zambian owned, are we in the right trajectory? In an event that aircraft breaks down, what happens? Are you really privy to the agreement that was signed? Because we are not seeing them. Because we even heard, is it 2 or 3 months ago, when the minister was saying, no, we shall be launching a South African road. To date, nothing has happened. Are we on the right track? And also, when you look at what we expected the Zambians was, Zambia Airways should have by now been very competitive. Where Proflight should have been fighting for customers. Now, the other side of the flip is the same. Where now Proflight still enjoys a lot of interest from customers other than Zambia Airways, despite the charges from Zambia Airways being relatively low. So what could be the problem? Because I thought if you are offering the same bag of mini meal, and this one is offering at 200 kwacha, someone at 195, people opt to go to buy a bag of mini meal at 195 because they'll be making a savings of 5 kwacha. Now that the opposite is the same, where now people, even if you look at the bookings now, Proflight still enjoys a massive customer benchmark other than Zambia Airways. So where is Zambia Airways getting it wrong? As a mistake.
Thank you so much, Honorable Salvalo. Maybe as an addition, witness, the concerns raised by the honorable member are critical, and I don't know how, even for civil aviation, I don't know how you'd pass an airline with only one aircraft, to be flying members of the public? What time are they servicing? How much time is dedicated to ensuring that it's safe for usage by the traveling public? When we go to page 18 of the memoranda, under the key recommendations on the way forward, this says expect the airline to be managed as a business. And then he says the ministry to enter into a performance contract with Zambia Airways board and provide smart targets to the board and management that will ensure that the airline is run as a business entity expected to mature in 3 to 4 years. Doesn't recommendation E open up for government interference in the operations of Zambia Airways? And doesn't it contradict recommendation D, where we want this airline to be managed as a business? Doesn't E give Zambia Airways undue advantage in the industry compared to other private aviation players such as Proflight? And then page 9, and in agreeing with you, witness, Zambia's geographical location entails that we maximize the potential of becoming that aviation hub, a very competitive aviation hub. Have we sealed all the loopholes from the word go in this partnership between Ethiopian Airlines and Zambia Airways? Especially that we're talking about a national flag carrier. So Honorable Selubalo asked about the agreement. I don't know if the witness has had sight and interacted with this agreement, and whether you feel confident that the loopholes have been sealed in this particular agreement. One of the key sectors with the former Zambia Airways, and it's unfortunate, I think the committee secretariat tried to get the Zambia National Farmers Union to be part of the witnesses, and we don't understand why they didn't see the benefit, because previously the one of the major beneficiaries of the Zambia Airways, as it used to be, was the agriculture sector, and we want to know that perspective from the agriculture sector. What role do they see Zambia Airways playing in the now going into the future? But of course, I don't know if it's too late, but maybe there must be a way of ensuring that we have representation from this particular sector. We can't be talking about the agriculture sector in the National Development Plan and the role that agriculture plays, we're supposed to play in the economy, and then you have players shunning such a very important discussion. The other question, again, page 9, second last paragraph, the memoranda says it should be Zambia Airways' policy to recruit, employ, and capacitate qualified Zambian personnel in preference to all others at all levels of the airline. Expatriate personnel should only be recruited where no Zambian with requisite qualifications are available. Zambia has institutional memory. From the old Zambia Airways, we still have our pilots who work for that airline. We still have our engineers who work for that airline. And but the scenario we have today is that we have more of the partner who's got 45% shareholding in terms of the running of, and with our people who were supposed to really push and ensure that they benefit from this particular opportunity in this industry, and who the country invested in so much, are still outside. What would be the position from the witness? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to start with the last. terms of the agreement, the shareholder agreement, I think the shareholder agreement allows for equity sharing of 45% by Ethiopian and 55% majority shareholding by, I think, the IDC. And maybe let me hasten to also mention what you actually observed on page 18, where we said the ministry to enter into a performance. I think I agree it is, I think, a typo on our part. It's not the ministry, but IDC and Ethiopian, because those are the shareholders. Sorry about that. I think it was a typo. But what was meant was that the shareholders should enter into a performance contract with Zambia Airways board to ensure that they perform according to the shareholders' expectations. But in terms of the number of employees vis-a-vis the other partner and IDC, I think on the ground currently, I think we have more Zambians within Zambia Airways. But we do understand that as an entity, the shareholders, they agreed to a broad range of terms within that shareholders agreement. I would not want to venture to actually, I might not be competent to interpret each and every term there, but I think what was meant was to reduce the risk of how much was required to start the business. And in going ahead to answer the other question as to why Zambia Airways has just been running one aircraft and whether they are still right on track, I think as an authority, we are aware that Zambia Airways had wanted to start venturing out to other within the region. But even as we designated them, I think it has taken long for some states to actually respond to the designation of Zambia Airways as a national carrier, as well as allow them to actually start bringing in different aircraft. We know that according to the agreement, what was agreed was that they were supposed to bring in 2 new aircraft, and I think our team already went and inspected those aircraft. We are reliably informed that those aircraft will be coming because I think there were 2 issues that were combined. There was COVID, which actually militated against if they brought all the aircraft, they were going to have now aircraft on the ground and start losing money. Certainly, I hear the committee members concerned that only one aircraft. Certainly, we would want to see a quick expansion. So we are seeing that COVID-19 is waning down. But we're also seeing that we've written to almost more than 8 states trying to designate Zambia Airways. The South African foreign operators permit was just recently granted, which will allow Zambia Airways to start flying into South Africa, because I think that is one of the most lucrative routes they want to start. And in that stead, Zambia Airways has actually applied to us that now they want to bring in another aircraft, the 737. We are actually in the process of assisting them to now put that bigger aircraft on the FOP, which was given the foreign operator permit for South Africa, so that it can be put on that route. So I do understand the challenges that the airline started during COVID, when the aviation business was very depressed, but we are confident that they are on the right track. In fact, in our view, we feel by limiting the number of aircraft, they acted prudently because they are going to start losing their money. They are going to easily become very loss-making. As to the fact that ProFlight still maintains a large part of the clientele, I think it's to be expected. Zambia will have to prove themselves on the market. And I think ProFlight has been there for quite some time. So they will have to fight for business. It is good that both airlines can do well. I think it's in our best interest because even their operational missions, I think, are different. We expect them later on when Zambia grows bigger to act complementary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Okay, Robert Salvador. I think I had some questions which have not been answered. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I think on that one, yes, even for us, we would have loved that the voice from the farming community, the agricultural community, would have been part of this because they're a key stakeholder. However, certainly we know that even if they haven't come through, they will still remain a key stakeholder. And if we are going to improve our horticultural and agricultural product export market, we need them. Because Zambia was, like I said, it had a captive market, you know this. What we've seen is other airlines have actually taken that market. But going forward, if Zambia is going to create a hub at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, we will need the synergies of different sectors to come together and actually prosecute a formidable strategy for Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Salvador.
A quick one. He is in charge of safety, isn't it? So I want to find out here whether it would be safer for Zambia Airways users to be using the same aircraft for even 5 years, next 5 years. And even because that is more or less like a local one, isn't it? Is it safe for us customers, us clients, to say no, it's fine, we can be using it for 5 years? That's the agreement, is it? Yeah. Is it safe?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question from the member. Aircraft are manufactured with a very long lifespan, and but some aircraft may not go that whole lifetime, depending on the maintenance that is done on those aircraft. For that reason, before an aircraft is registered, the Civil Aviation Authority of the country of registration has a duty to ensure that the aircraft comes into the country as a healthy aircraft, and also a further duty to ensure that the aircraft is put on a maintenance program that will maintain that health of the aircraft for the foreseeable future. The aircraft that is in use right now by Zambia Airways has an aircraft maintenance program which was reviewed by our experts against the manufacturer's recommendations and established that it was indeed speaking to the manufacturer's recommendations vis-a-vis the maintenance of the aircraft in order to ensure that it's airworthy for as long as it is in service. So the aircraft is undergoing a maintenance program according to the manufacturer, and it can continue. In short, the answer for 5 years, definitely yes. Some aircraft have gone even beyond 20, 30 years. At a certain point, there's what are called aging aircraft. That number is different for different types of aircraft, but for any given type, at that point, when it is now deemed to be an aging aircraft, the maintenance goes even heavier to look even at the structural members of the aircraft. Are there any cracks anywhere in the more sensitive areas of the aircraft? There are ways in which that can be checked using non-destructive techniques. So even when they get old, there is that the aircraft is still safe. If I could go back to your earlier question about now whether this maintenance is whether there is ground time enough for the maintenance to be carried out. The utilization of this aircraft at the moment, according to the statistics from the airline, is about 4 hours, I think. Its maximum utilization is 8 hours. So it is still actually below the level of utilization that it is capable of. And for that reason, they are even able to keep the aircraft on the ground. Every Tuesday, the aircraft has no flights, actually. On Tuesdays, it's on the ground for maintenance. Apart from that, the maintenance program specifies or prescribes other smaller checks while the aircraft is in service. Pre-flight just before the aircraft takes off, line checks. So there's, on a daily basis, there's more than one check taking place just to ensure that the aircraft is airworthy. And then there's that Tuesday, which they put aside because they have sufficient time on their hands to do even heavier maintenance on the aircraft. So in short, the answer is yes, the aircraft is safe. But I can also add that this aircraft came in at a point where the two original aircraft, which had been earmarked, it wasn't possible to bring either of those two. So this one was brought in as a stopgap, but it was also equally checked. And now they are in the process of bringing one of the area two. I'm saying this because those two are actually younger aircraft than the one that is currently in use. So this one will go, and one of the younger aircraft will come, of course later to be followed by even the other one of this type, the two Q400s. This is apart from the 737, which the Director General spoke about earlier on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We've been informed that the Q400 is made for higher altitude. That is Ethiopian climate as compared to our local environment here. And as such, it consumes more fuel. So I wanted to get your comment on that, especially when you're talking about profitability. And then we've been told that it's Zambian government the one which is paying for the lease of that aircraft. And as such, the Ethiopian Airways are not really worried about profitability because they're able to make more money from the lease arrangement. Your comment?
The altitudes at which aircraft can operate are quite wide. There is a wide an aircraft is designed for some optimum conditions which are not far from what is expected to be experienced in different environments. This particular aircraft, I would not agree that it is just for high altitudes. It performs very well in various other altitudes, such as ours here. And so far, we have not experienced any problems or deficiencies associated with the design of the aircraft, because that question points to whether the design of the aircraft is appropriate for our environment. Our position there is that yes, it is appropriate for this environment. Thank you, Chair.
I think on the question of attitude, I want to make a follow-up on that. I think the question is is whether or not the aircraft cannot perform here because there are high altitudes in Ethiopia, but here it's lower, and therefore it cannot perform. I think that's not the question. The question is whether you have high altitude, the costs are higher, in terms of fuel, as compared to here where the altitude is lower. So how do you compare that? Because we are worried that this aircraft would be more costly to run here where there are lower altitudes. For them, they don't care because that's the environment they have, But when you come to Zambia, we have a different environment, and therefore one would think that we would procure an aircraft which suits our environment and which will give us higher returns than getting an aircraft which works in higher altitudes, and therefore the costs are higher, and then you bring it here and maintain the high costs, and therefore your profitability is reduced. And I think that is our main worry. It's on the costs.
And maybe before the witness comes in, we want to draw comfort from the fact that there's one new aircraft that is on the way, is supposed to come. Again, from a safety point of view, and asking as a layman, the continued usage of one stopgap aircraft definitely goes to affect the safety of this particular vessel. Whether it's on the road, etc. I mean, the chances, the likelihood of it being overused are also very, very high. And I think that is also one of the anxieties from the members of the public, is to say we have one aircraft, and the aircraft we have wasn't part of the original plan. The original plan was that we're going to have two new aircrafts, and the one we've been using for the last 1 year is a stopgap measure. Has this stopgap measure overstayed its welcome in that regard? Of course, there's indication that it will be, once the other one comes in, it will be withdrawn. What happens to the local routes if we are opening up, new routes at regional level? The other question I would ask would be that Zambia Airways is operating as a private business, but yet it's supposed to be our national flag carrier. Do we need a specific law, such as an act of parliament, to protect the operations of this airline, or do we believe that just like this as the situation is right now? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and the committee. I think I wanted to just delve in on the issue of profitability and the issue of whether the height and the choice of the aircraft makes for it difficult to actually make a profit. I think as an authority currently, what the information we're getting from the airline is that they are breaking even. Now, my director talked about the issue of aircraft utilization. Anytime an aircraft is on the ground, the airline starts making money because the airline is actually paying lease charges for that aircraft, and the idea is to use it at least closer to its maximum utilization. What the director mentioned was that currently they're almost at 50% of total utilization. Now, if, like I mentioned, if they brought in another aircraft when the business hasn't grown that much, that's where now the airline starts making losses. But in terms of worry about whether this is a correct aircraft, I think you guys who actually do when they are comparing makes of aircraft. Different makes of aircraft which are comparable to the aircraft they're using. Some may have certain advantages, whilst they have other disadvantages. Similarly, this aircraft also might have some disadvantages in comparison to other types of aircraft. And then it will have other advantages over it. So the team that sits to select, they must obviously look at what works for them. And we do believe that the airline must have done that when they actually settled for those. And from the empirical evidence reaching us, is that they are not making losses, which is the major worry that the committee has, that maybe it will not be making enough money. We have not heard that they are making losses. What we've heard is that they are breaking even. Then there were three questions. I've only answered, maybe just to remind me just a little bit, Honorable. The law to protect Zambians. Currently, I do not think it would be necessary because the current Companies Act is sufficient. And certainly the Companies Act provides sufficient safeguards on how it should be run.
Thank you so much, witness. Maybe as the last question from my end, the lease charges. Are we paying the same lease charges on this aircraft as we would have paid had the original, intended aircraft come in place? I don't know if the question is clear. Okay.
It is clear, Chair, but I would not be really sure what the airline is paying because I know that currently I think the lease charges should be taken over by Ethiopian. I think that is what must have been agreed, isn't it? I don't know who is paying, but according to their agreement, I think there must be. I'm not so sure exactly what they are paying, but us as an authority, our focus is to see that the airline must be viable. And in order to be viable, we ensure that they maintain the international standards and recommended practices so that it's a safe and secure airline. The integral manners how they manage their business with their suppliers, I think that we haven't dwelled in it. As long as we see that they have a function agreement and they can use the aircraft properly and they will actually subject it to maintenance properly so that we can allow it to fly in our skies. Thank you.
Would you know if there's a time frame to the arrival of the new aircraft?
When are they? I know that they want it as quickly as possible because they would want to put it on the South African route. But what we've been told by our colleagues in South Africa is that it's supposed to be amended to the FOP. They're supposed to publish it. I don't know if it's 21 days or 21 days. Yes, for 21 days. So they will have to wait until that publication has been done so that they don't bring it here and then it starts sitting on the ground. But indication they've given us is that they are ready to bring it. It's just that the market where they need to take it, there is that constraint. Yes.
Okay. Witness, we want to thank you for your presentation, and thank you for taking the concern. Respected members of this committee, ours is just to thank you for gracing us with your presence. I think your memoranda is quite enriching. It will go a long way in briefing up Madam Speaker's report, and I think that the recommendations will be taken forward. With that said, if there's any other information you'd come across we may wish to convey to this committee before we finalize our sittings. Please feel free to do so. And at this point, it is just to say that we are now withdrawing that immunity conferred on you, but of course you remain with a greater immunity conferred on you, as by the Constitution of Zambia as a free citizens. But thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to more interaction. Thank you. Thank you. Please carry your water if you need it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Witness, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to ask you to thereafter the members of the committee will also introduce themselves. But even before you do your introductions, you can be comforted that under Cap 12 of the laws of Zambia, you are conferred with the same immunities as the members of parliament when you appear on this committee. So anything you say here would not be used against you in any court of law. Suffice to say that should you deliberately choose to mislead us, the same Cap 12 would be used against you. We believe that you would not deliberately mislead this committee in any way, and please feel free to interact with us. Information as as it's possible, and just also mention that the deliberations of this committee are live on Parliament TV, so we have an audience that is following the deliberations. The more reason why we want to provide as much accurate information as possible. Please feel free as you interact with us. You have that immunity, and please proceed to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll go on and introduce myself. My name is Captain Kalumbe, and I'm Captain ex-military from the Zambia Air Force, and I'm also Captain as I'm conferred an airlines transport pilot's license, and I'm also on one of the required given that entitlement. So that was bestowed on me by my former employers, Flight Zambia, and of course validated by the Civil Aviation Authority. So my professional background is that I was initially military personnel. I worked for the Zambia Air Force for 11 years, and I was employed there as a qualified flying instructor based in Livingstone. I retired from Zambia Air Force Mumbwa. I was attached to 21 Squadron. That's K8 Fighter Squadron. And when I left the military, I pursued a civil aviation career. So I started at the lowest, career platform for flying. I started as a VFR pilot in Livingstone. I was flying a Tiger Vintage 1939 aircraft, and I worked my way to Lusaka, and I joined a company called Zamfari, where I was working as flight instructor for Lusaka Flying School. I moved on to Zambian Airways, where I joined as a first officer until the company was closed down. Thereafter, I moved to ProFlight Zambia, and it's at ProFlight where I built my career in aviation management. So, in as much as I'm a qualified flying instructor and examiner, I call myself a qualified aviator. And at ProFlight, I got involved in management. I set up the caravan fleet management at that facility, as well as the safety management system, which is actually being used at the company right now. And I think that credit is partly because of myself. Having gone through that, I moved on to Royal Air Charters, where my skills were recognized. I started off as chief pilot. I went on to become operations manager, and then I was elevated to the position of general manager and director of operations before I left the company last year in November due to the restructuring which is going on in the company. So, there was no longer space for a person of my position in that company. So right now, I'm more or less like doing my own consultancy and my own company. So I think those details I can share with later, not relevant for this discussion. Other than that, So I've been certified for aircraft operations, dangerous goods, and knowledge in aircraft operations tests, and just as a lead auditor. So in the event that the CA or ICAO came here and they do not have a lead auditor to assist them, I am certified. So if they check their database and they find me, then I can join that audit panel. So that's basically me. So in terms of my flight experience, I'm close to 10,000 hours now, but I just have about 9,600 hours, I think, total. That's why I say 10,000 hours. In terms of academics, I just completed my academic programs with the University of Lusaka. I'm waiting to defend my thesis, which is challenges faced by LLC holders in Zambia. So this is where I'm coming from, and I hope that's enough for this committee.
It's more than enough. I mean, you remind me of a certain movie I watched, The Men of Honor. You know, maybe we should have given you a lot of insignia and, you know, but I mean, thank you for the service you've rendered to this nation, you know, and again, also in your individual capacity as well as you know, military personnel. I think for the interest of this committee, we would want to get your input into the management and operations of the Zambia Airways. I think that is very important for us, very important for this committee. Clearly from your rich CV, you are an expert in this field, and we expect that we'll have expert opinion and advice, as well as advising on the way forward. We know that we don't have, I think, of about 15 minutes, you know, and I know that it's something that you can speak to. So over to you, sir.
Sorry. Okay, thanks very much for this opportunity. First of all, I would like to apologize for the manner.
I apologize, witness. My apologies. I thought we had introduced ourselves. I think you're clearly speaking to strangers. I know that the members of this committee will not give lengthy CVs. They'll give their names and constituencies and then allow you to give the floor.
Definitely, Chair. Thank you so much. I'm Sialuvalo, Gift, Member of Parliament for Sinazongwe Parliamentary Constituency.
I'm Frank Simushi, Member of Parliament for Skongo constituency.
I'm Newton Samakai, Member of Parliament for Mwendunga constituency and part of this committee.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome witness. I'm Honorable Dr. Taro Chewe, Member of Parliament for Luansechi constituency. You are welcome.
I'm Joseph S. Musanje, Member of Parliament for Mbabara constituency. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Darius Kunda, coming from the Office of the Clerk of National Assembly.
And I witness, my name is Sunday Chanda, Member of Parliament for Kanchia constituency. Apologies to the members of the committee for that oversight. I know that we've introduced ourselves a couple of times today. I thought we had already done so for this particular sitting. Please over to you, witness.
Okay, thanks very much for giving me this opportunity to speak before the committee. Like I mentioned before I was interrupted, first of all, I just want to apologize in the manner in which I drafted my submission. It was done in a haste, and there could be a little bit of some grammatical errors here and there, but I hope you did get the gist out of it. So when I made that submission, it was very difficult for me to actually come up with a paper like that because there was no supporting documentation. What I mean is that